Hi, I'm Bobby Halton, and welcome to today's Fire Engineering's Google Hangout. I'm here in San Diego, California, at our offices of Fire Rescue Magazine. I probably should say our Fire Engineering Google Hangout. I'm here at the offices of our Fire Rescue Magazine with the editor-in-chief of Fire Rescue, my good friend Erich Roden, Chief Erich Roden. And we've been meeting with our staff here, having a great week. But before we begin, with our good friends Nick and Dan and Ricky, we'd just like to take a moment to express our condolences and our deep sympathies to the family and friends and to all our firefighter brothers and sisters in Hartford, Connecticut, in the loss of firefighter Bell last night. Probably everybody watching this hangout is fully aware of the fact that Hartford lost a great firefighter last night and a good family man, and our hearts are heavy. And CAL FIRE lost a pilot. We're extremely sad for our friends here. We're in California. We're in California right now, so we're extremely sad for our friends here at CAL FIRE. You know, I think Patty Brown once said it best. He said, a firefighter can do everything right and still get killed on this job. It's an incredibly dangerous job, and you know, the fools coined the saying years ago, train every day so that everyone goes home. And I think that, in hopes that everyone goes home, I think was the original phrase. And I think that you couldn't have a better bunch of firefighters on with us today that epitomize that effort and that desire to bring training home and make training relevant, and make training meaningful in the hopes that everybody goes home. But again, to everybody in Hartford, to all his family and friends, to all our friends in Hartford, to all our friends in Connecticut, we're so sorry for you. And to those our fellow firefighters that were burnt last night during that fire, we hope you have a speedy recovery. So that being said, you know, I know hearts are heavy, and you know, I don't know what happened there. It would probably be months before we do, but I'm sure that Hartford will share with us everything they can from this event and honor his memory appropriately. And as soon as we know the details of funeral arrangements and funds that I'm sure are going to be set up, we'll be sure to put them on Firefighter Nation and on fireengineering.com and share them with you as best we can. So, want to add anything?
Yeah, it was a really tough night last night. Obviously, our hearts go out to Kevin Bella's family and the firefighters that were injured last night. You know, we'll be pulling for you guys. We hope those watching today do as well. So, also, kind of in a related aside, a precinct in Chicago had a shooting incident. A police officer, or captain, I should say, was shot attempting to arrest a subject. So, be safe out there, folks. I mean, it's dangerous out there, and you know, today we're going to talk about some control measures to kind of make that less dangerous for us out there. We're going to talk to the fiercest trainings guys. So, with that, let's talk.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to open it up to our guests, and I guess what we should probably do, those of you out there who are watching today who don't know who Traditions Training are, you have to have been living under a rock for the last 10 years. Probably one of the most innovative, creative, dynamic, prolific groups of trainers in the country. I was just out with Nick in Wichita at Wichita Hot. They train extensively all around the country. So if you have questions for us today about training, or about some of the challenges with doing training, or what are the most sought-after training things out there, or how do we get folks re-excited about the basics and get them reconnected to the essentials of our job, you can reach us by doing hashtag FETalk. That's hashtag FETalk, and we'll get those questions in. Our good buddy Brandon, our producer, he's online with us today, and Brandon will get those questions to us either through the internet, or he'll come on and say, hey, we got a question from somewhere. So Brandon, don't feel shy and jumping in. And did I get that right, Brandon? It's hashtag FETalk. And Brandon's not talking to us. Okay, Mr. Producer. We appreciate it. He's muted his mic. He's camera shy. Brandon, it's hashtag FETalk, right, boss?
That's right. Hashtag FETalk, or you can tweet directly to at Fire Engineering on Twitter.
or you can tweet directly to Fire Engineering at Twitter or hashtag FETalk. And if you just want to express your condolences to our brothers and sisters in Hartford, that's absolutely great too. We'd appreciate that. So with that in mind, I think we couldn't have a more connected group of men on with us today. And I guess I'll throw out the first question to the guys. And what's the number one thing that folks reach out to you all as you're doing your training, either in your departments? I know several of your training officers, either in your organizations or outside your organizations, where they say, hey, we need training in this. And then what's your perception of what kind of training people really need? And I guess we'll start with Nick. Why don't you, or Ricky, whoever wants to kick it off, just jump in there. Pretend it's a union meeting and they're screwing us again.
Well, I've got a couple things to bring up in that case.
I would say, since I've been here pretty much from the start with our company, is that it just kind of goes and flows. And I think Dan and Nick will both agree with that, is that on a yearly basis, it depends on what the hot thing is. We started the whole company around RIT, and Pete Lund, one of our founders, said, we talked about it after a year, and said, we should be training on the basics so we don't have to have RIT. So we did like a year or two of RIT stuff. I mean, that's all we did, almost every other weekend, and then we moved on to engine company operations and forcible entry. So I would say, by the looks of our schedule, engine company operations are starting to take a glide up, and we'll talk about that when we talk about some of the slicers information, I'm sure, here today, is that they feel that they have to get that attack line in service a lot quicker. But that and company officer development has been really, really big here in the last 2 years, I would say. We probably do 1 or 2 classes a month on company officer development and chief officer development.
Well, to quote the great Andy Fredericks, he used to tell us, he used to call his class engine company ops. He used to call it, he always used to write, when he start the class, he used to write the job and on the door. And then he used to always remind us, he used to say, put the fire out, you don't got to worry about jumping out the window.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I know that's what we're training on. I know, talking to Nick, that's, getting back to those basics. You said something when you started, said, we, as firefighters or as a fire department, we shouldn't need to be excited. And it doesn't need to use a term that Nick's always used. It shouldn't need to be sexy. These basic operations, the engine company operations, force and entry, getting control of the door, getting the line on the fire quickly, and obviously all the information is telling us that we have to do it a lot quicker now. These things aren't sexy. They're not exciting. They're just the basic part of our job that we have to be very, very proficient in. And if you're not going to concentrate on those, there's no sense concentrating on the complicated stuff, because you're never going to get to it. Nick?
Well, Chief Halton kind of asked 2 different questions. I guess kind of the, what we do here on the side, with traditions and what I know I deal with at work. I'm the training chief here in Columbia, and it's 2 vastly different worlds for me. When I handle a lot of the class inquiries, obviously, for traditions, and if I had to sum it up in a nutshell, just piggybacking on what Chief Riley was saying, is the top 2 things people want is they want to know how to do more with less, and they want something good. And that might sound vague or whatever, but the kind of people that end up getting a hold of us, they just want some good training. And sometimes I'm not sure if they really even care what it is. Sometimes I feel like we could come out there saying we were going to do X, Y, Z, and if we did ABC and it was still good, they'd be thrilled, because they were just ate-up firefighters looking for some good stuff. Inside a department, it's probably what all of us experience. There's like a 5-mile boundary around your organization's, geographical limits. In which when you're in it, you're just one of the guys, and as soon as you go out of there, all of a sudden everybody wants to hear from you. So in here, I get honestly a less specific request for some things, but what I do in my position, I've taken a very different kind of approach to the training chief kind of position. And what I do as part of my job is I kind of watch the entire fire department. I go to a lot of incidents. I show up in them. Sometimes I just watch. A lot of times I participate, but I use that kind of stuff to kind of gain a cross shift all over the area sense of, what are we excelling at, what do we need work on, what policies looked good on paper that aren't working, and what turned out to work really well, and try and kind of use that to guide the overall training direction of the department. We've graduated a lot of recruits lately, and we do get requests for, hey, these guys need some time forcing doors, or they need some times cutting roofs, and we do a lot of acquired building stuff to do that kind of thing. But I mean, it is interesting to kind of do this training thing both as a full-time job and as a part-time job, for lack of a better term, and kind of see they're two totally different worlds.
Dan, what's the hot lick in Fairfax now?
It's much to what Nick was saying, and I have to actually, before you get really much further, is one of our instructors said there was a glare off my head, so I want to make sure that you guys, you can't see that glare. That team's doing.
Are they still in the hunt? Did they?
What? How do you say that?
How'd it go last night, by the way?
They're not playing. They already won. But anyway, with Fairfax, we're seeing the same things what Nick's talking about, and what the trend that we see a lot of times with classes, and I refuse to accept the notion that our fire service, modern day fire service, is not engaged. A lot of the classes we end up doing are based upon company officers, chief officers, really squared away guys within small volunteer departments, larger departments, who are recognizing what the trends are in a national scope, but also looking at their own people and saying, this is the weaknesses we have, and we need someone to help us address it. And curriculum-based programs aren't the answer. We need reality-based programs that are coming out and sharing what you do in Fairfax or Clearwater or D.C. or Columbia, South Carolina, and then taking that and seeing how not just someone coming in throwing something at us and saying, do it the way we do it, but here's plenty of options. A lot of it goes back to us to have this ability to execute the basics perfectly on the fire ground in a chaotic environment. So we have to give those guys the reps over and over again doing the right behavior. And what we see nowadays really is you have engaged leaders within these departments who recognize they need assistance, but what has changed is the people who we deal with. They learn differently, and we have to be really vigilant about not exercising our own bias about how we learn onto these new recruits or these new people in the fire service, because they have the intellectual curiosity. They want to learn. They want to do this. And they're just looking for the avenue, and that's the benefit we get and the privilege we get is, we get these people call and say, I need help, as Nick said, hey, I need help with engine company work. And we might get there and realize that they need more than just engine company work. Really what they need is an idea of how to develop, the right behaviors, condition the right behaviors. So we do the combat ready class, and the guys do an excellent job of reconditioning behaviors, so then you can have the right behavior to go into the skill set. So that's the great thing about what we get to do is it's not based upon a certification or a set curriculum. It's really, working with fellow firefighters and recognizing what they need help on and helping them develop the strategies that they can then take to the fire ground and execute perfection on the fire ground in that chaotic environment.
Yeah, the one thing I've always, I'll get Erich speaking too, because he's the former chief of training from Milwaukee, but one of the things I always enjoyed about what P.L. Vulcan, Mark Gregory, and what Traditions and you guys and our friends, Jason Holman with his engine company guys, and all the really solid groups that are out there doing some training, is that they don't just come out to your place and give you, here's the training. They leave you with drills that your folks can pick up and do day after day after day after day. So I'm going to throw it to my partner here and say, what do you think of the? In other words, when I was running training back in Albuquerque, we had a drill book, and we had certain core drills that we repeated monthly, and there were 4 or 5 of them. What do you think of the core? We talked about advancing a hand line. Obviously, I think that's the most critical, and that was one we did every month. What do you think of the 4 or 5 core drills that we should be looking at routinely? I mean, virtually every day, but we should be practicing them to some kind of intense level, at least weekly, if not monthly.
Well, I mean, I guess you start with the main one is water. Every problem on the fire ground, every time we get into trouble, it's usually related to some type of water problem. So, from an academy perspective, if you're bringing people out to the fire academy, you're doing like a multi-unit drill for that matter, you want to have some type of water operation in there, whether it's stretching a line, wet the line as well, starting there, and then everything else that supports that kind of falls in the line: forcible entry, ventilation, search, communications, command, etc. All that stuff should support that main foundational aspect of the fire service and operation. But obviously, when we talk about core issues in the fire company, or core drills, or core training for that matter, you want to start with evaluating your company. What does your company need? Dan mentioned these inspired firefighters, etc. Not every company has the same problems. Not every company needs work on the same things. So I'll toss this to the gang here. What are some ways, or what is a way to begin evaluating your company to determine your company's training needs? Let's throw that out there. As a company officer, how would you evaluate your company to determine its training needs or operational needs?
Well, I got a couple of thoughts on. I mean, at a company officer level, I mean, I think that the two most obvious ways you have. I mean, let's just assume I'm a new lieutenant. I just got assigned an engine, whatever, and I don't really know them, and I want to see what's up. I mean, the two opportunities you're going to most obviously be presented with are calls and drills. And obviously nobody can really control their call volume and stuff. I think that's where you're going to see the most. You're going to see the most informative information is watching guys' performance on actual calls. But of course, that comes at a time of its own, and it comes at a cost of its own. I mean, you can't just wait for a fire to come in and see how things go. And if things don't go well, oh, we'll go fix it. Because I mean, somebody, it might cost somebody, their life in the process of it. So I mean, getting your guys out there and getting them into the street and doing what that company does or is expected to do on a regular basis, I think is a much more proactive and safer way. I mean, if you run a territory that runs 6-story, century-old walk-up apartment buildings, you've got an entirely different set of drills and skill levels to work on than if you run an area that runs, 1-story ranchers with rural water supply. But I think, your calls and your drills are kind of your starting point.
Dan.
And Nick's exactly right. I mean, I think there's two parts also to that. Is one is that individual assessment that company officers should be doing to look at what is each person's strengths and weaknesses to what we do, and then looking as a company coming together and executing together as a team. Because all too often you see a lot of times is that you'll have a weak link within a company, and they'll do one of two things: either they will banish the person from the island, or they'll work to really kind of isolate that person's weaknesses and start to build those into his strengths so that you can work together and execute as a company. And we really want people to do that, because otherwise what ends up happening is that person who you value as a weak link is going to be the one person that may either change the trend, or with that incident turn into a line of duty death or close call. They may be that change agent, because we know all the line of duty deaths we see are a confluence of basic fundamental skills that aren't being executed, that happen all together at the same exact time. And then, bam, we have this catastrophic event. But I think the other part of it that that we have to look at, especially the company officer, and this is something I really harp on with the company officers I'm fortunate to have, is they need to have a purpose. And if you don't define what the purpose is of your company, and not leave it up to a fire chief to tell you what the purpose is of the organization, but as a company, have a defined purpose of what you do, and then make sure that every one of those people understand that. Dan Pink did a great thing. We talked about, if you want to figure out if you're going the right way as a company officer, guiding your ship, or running your organization, is give everyone an index card and say, what's the purpose of our company? What's our motto? And if they're not writing down the same thing, then before you ever get to the skills, we need to work on defining the purpose of the company. Then the skills and the drills and everything else we do will feed back into this, so they know that you're not just training for arbitrary purposes. You're training for a purpose that you define and you're living by. And I think that's the first step to really making sure that your training needs are being met, is that you're working towards that common purpose. And you got everyone on the same page, and you're getting their input to help that purpose. Ricky?
Oh no, I'm going to let you, Nick, handle that one.
Well,
we have to do pretty much everybody gets the same training. So if we see a problem on a fireground or something, we usually address it through company ops. So all the engines of the trucks and the rescues all get the same training, and then show how it needs to be done. And then we get to see it a month later when we have a run. That they've done it good, and so I mean, we don't individually customize it pretty much for an individual company. We leave that up to the company officer, like Dan said. So.
Well, one thing we're doing, and it's kind of funny you mentioned this. There always needs to be space and time and room left over for the company officer to have time to do things at an individual level that they notice one-on-one that maybe, quote unquote, the big chiefs don't see. You always got to leave them time for that. But sometimes I think it's easy as a company officer to get overwhelmed with all of the possible options of things they could be doing, and they need a little bit of guidance. So we're actually, in about, I don't know, a day or so here, implementing this core competency program that one of my captains designed. And basically, to make a long story short, we've highlighted 15 skills that we're going to focus on in the calendar year. Things like, advance the attack line, force an inward door, remove a fire victim, one-man ladder throw, whatever. And we got those skills because we queried all of our chief officers, and we said, based on what you guys have seen with your companies, what do we need to focus on? What do the guys need to focus on? And surprise, surprise, it came back with a lot of the basic stuff. So now, we're gonna that's gonna be the focus of our core competency program for the year, and we're gonna support that program by providing, documentation, training, drills, outlines, videos, acquired building-based training, stuff that's focused around that kind of stuff. And the crux of it is that starting on January 1, at random intervals, training staff will show up at these departments and say, okay, you guys are being evaluated on skills 1, 7, and 9, ready, go. And they'll get randomly selected and randomly evaluated on the skills. They'll either succeed or they'll get feedback and growth opportunities to improve it. But I think it's going to provide a good balance between leaving the company officer with room to do their thing at their own individual level, but also provide them some structured level training at a department level that's kind of been identified by everybody.
And Nick, can I add something to that? We just actually, we have the same exact name as the program. We just finished our core competency training. That was for the entire department. It was exactly what you said. It was every battalion distributed to all their stations that here is the core competencies we're going to do in the summer. And it was exactly what Nick talked about. And it was an evaluation process of stretching hose lines, forcible entry, search and rescue. And they knew what we were looking for that. And then they were put onto a calendar and they reported to the academy. And they run through these evolutions in real time. And while they run through these evolutions, not only are they being videotaped with a GoPro on top of the forcible entry door, and they're being timed for all the evolutions. There's time sequences that if they didn't meet the time or something happened, it wasn't punitive. So right there, they turned around and they got the training on it. So forcible entry was a big one for us. That's something we don't do often. As engine company members, we're really spoiled by we usually have a truck or rescue right there to do it, but we still have to know how to do the skills. So I would say from a battalion level, I thought it was a resounding success. The guys did a fantastic job of implementing this, that guys really got into it. They got competitive. God forbid firemen are competitive, but they're competitive about it. They want to do great as a company. They all want to be, and essentially we had a red, green, and yellow marking system. If you're green, then your entire company battalion got put into the department journal that came out to the entire department and say, all right, here's our A companies, and here's what they did. So we're kind of build that esprit de corps, but we're saying, hey, here's the expectation, is executing these basics perfectly, and then give them the opportunity to go out and do it. And if they don't, you realize that maybe they haven't had a chance to do forcible entry. So non-punitively, we can say, all right, look, you're not going to lose your job or lose rank. We want you to execute the skill. So it worked out really well, and I'm glad to hear another department's doing the same thing. And it's just really bringing the focus back to these basics.
I always, when I was thinking earlier when we were asked about what drills I thought were critical, I always thought back when I was doing training back in New Mexico and Texas, that it would have been great if somebody had actually written a book with, like, I don't know, 10, 15, 25 things that were like good ideas.
I don't know if there's 25.
Well, things that would maybe help you
Five.
survive fireground. I mean, I don't know if it'd be a good idea if somebody would do that, but
I agree.
there was a book like that. There was a
It's
book like that out
24, but
there.
not 25.
Maybe 23, maybe it's 26. Honestly,
No,
Hey,
25, and I think it's available through Penwell.
yeah. I just think while we're talking about core competencies and while we're talking about drill, it's important. My brothers here have written a great book, 25 to Survive. If you're looking for drills, if you're looking for some kind of direction into how to develop your core competencies, here's the template right there. There's a well thought out, well constructed book by experienced, dedicated guys with real pedigrees that can help you develop your core competencies, develop the drills that you want to do. I mean, it's called 25 to Survive, and I highly recommend you pick it up and come to FDIC, and please come see Dan and Doug and Ricky and participate in their class, and it's great stuff. We've got questions that are coming in to our producer Brandon. So Brandon, if you just want to make your mic live and hit us with a couple of the questions, that would probably be fine with us. So what do you have for a question, partner?
Sure. Ryan Pennington asks, he'd like to start using abandoned or condemned buildings to train in. Wants to know if that is a good resource and where to start. John K. asked about basic mistakes that you see training officers doing when they're trying to move along their program, and how they can correct those.
All right, let's start with those two. So Dan, Doug, Ricky, first question, acquired structures. Any thoughts on acquired structures?
I don't mind tackling that one first because that's really something that's near and dear to my heart. Because first of all, I say is I had the fortunate pleasure of serving the 1400 committee. So 1403, which is our live fire acquired structure burn, is coming up for revision in January 5th is when public comments close. And this is a vitally important standard for us to make sure that it carries through because there's such a benefit out of it. So I please tell anyone in the audience, we don't get a whole lot of public comments, but if you have something to add about 1403, January 5th is it. But to that point, I think it's absolutely essential. I mean, it depends on the local jurisdiction about how you can use the structure. I mean, I don't want to say, hey, you can go through any random house you want to and destroy it because that's called trespassing. But for us, I filtered the address to our field training staff, and they do a fantastic job of tracking down who the owners are and go through the acquired structure process. And if we can get the house before it goes to demolition, then great. We don't have to go burn on it, but one thing I really harp on is I want guys to train in the area where they work because that's where you're going to go to fires. Not a sterile environment 20 or 30 miles away at a training academy in a block building with nice wide stairwells and no hoarders. I want you to be in the area that you're actually going to fight fires in and do this job. So if you can capitalize on that, depending upon your local jurisdiction's laws, fantastic. Get out there and try to find out who the owners are and track down the information and see if you can get in there and use it for training.
Acquired buildings, I could jump up and down about. They are the best thing since sliced bread for training. They are the best thing you can do aside from go into a fire. And before I go too far into that, not even live fire. I'm not even not even burning the buildings, just the other resources you can use for them. We were very fortunate here. At any given moment, we probably have 5 to 6 houses that are available for us to do acquired buildings training in, and very regularly we get apartment buildings. Occasionally we get a high-rise. Right now in the past 2 days we picked up a huge hotel complex, including a 4-story mid-rise. And we've done that by, number one, developing relationships with the people in our government that run that stuff. So the buildings inspections people, the code enforcement people, they're your gateway to figure out what's available, and they're a great liaison to actually get the official permissions from the people who own the buildings. And we've gotten to the point now where we get phone calls from contractors who have gotten our information from the buildings people trying to get us to save them some dollar by half demolishing their building. So they're the best thing in the world, I think. And since I've been here, we haven't burned a one of them. We haven't burned a one of them, and I think that we've still gotten some of the best training we've been able to do. out of those buildings, because in my burn building I don't have walls and ceilings you can overhaul. I don't have a window in my Class A burn building that you can do a windowsill to floor cut down. My roof pop is great, but it doesn't have all the things that a real flat or pitched roof has. So by being able to get these people out into real buildings that, like Dan was saying, are really in the community and get their real hands on it, before the bell rings. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, short of real world fire experience, I mean, there's not much better that you can do than getting some good acquired buildings and having a good plan on what to do with them.
Okay, the second part of the question, or the second question that Brandon threw out to us, was what were some of the common mistakes that training officers make that you've seen out there? And we're kind of lucky here. We've got 5 training chiefs, a couple of current training chiefs, but all of us were training chiefs at one point in our careers. What are some of the common mistakes you see officers doing, and then how can they be on guard not to make them, or how can they correct them after they make them? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I can start. First is letting people not wear their gear properly, and taking shortcuts and allowing shortcuts and listening and entertaining the excuses for why that shortcut works and why we do it in this company. Obviously, at the academy level, you train all-encompassingly, based on policy. Individual companies have certain ways of doing things, but when we stray exponentially, or as we exponentially stray from these department policies and procedures, that's when we see people out of position. We see people not carrying what they're supposed to be carrying, etc. When an incoming company is expecting that to happen. So, doing it by the book, literally and figuratively, sometimes, most of the time, works. But if you make adaptations, make sure that's not based on cutting corners or taking any shortcuts whatsoever. Also, not letting certain people participate in some of the evolutions as well. If the entire company is tasked with doing that at a fire, everyone in the company is going to do it. So, we talk about Dan was mentioning the weak link in the company. I know that's kind of off-putting to some people, but being realistic and current former training officers, we've seen companies that say, Jim Bob always has a mask problem or something like that. So, we can't keep them in the door position on the engine company. Well, it's one of the most important positions on the engine. So we don't necessarily want that person there every time if they're not going to fulfill their duties or get, haphazard next days going in that role. So everybody's on the hook to do everything. Wear your gear properly and don't cut corners, period.
Good stuff.
Nick, how many written reprimands have you gotten from me when I see pictures of our students not wearing full PPE?
I'm sorry, Chief. You broke up. I couldn't hear you.
Hey, an internal traditions training, coaching and counseling for pictures posted on the internet of our class of people wearing fire extrication gloves doing forcible entry.
Hey, to jump on that, man, I could go through the roof with this one too. But I have to absolutely say the #1 mistake that people, training officers, make in regards to anything is forgetting that you are first and foremost a firefighter. There are so many people that think there's a couple classifications of people. There's people who go into training because they got a couple years left and it's time to hang it up, so they're looking to slow down a notch. And then you got a couple people who go into training because they don't have a clue what to do on a fire, and it's a good spot to hide behind a book or whatever. My motto for myself and my motto for my division here is I earn the right to tell you what I think you ought to do because I first and foremost know what to do myself. And the only way you can retain that credibility and the only way that you can live up to that is to be out there doing it yourself. And I don't just mean, you get up on the roof prop also. I mean, you need to carve time out of your day, you need to carve time out of your week or whatever, and you need to get in your little car or whatever it is you drive and go to fires and do all the things that you tell other people how to do. If you haven't cut a roof in 2 years or you haven't commanded a fire in 6 months, what right do you have to safely instruct somebody else on how to do that kind of thing? I think it's imperative that every training agency or every training bureau starts with that. I mean, if you look at the world between my job here and my job in Traditions Training. Traditions Training has been such a great thing because it's always been founded on great firefighters who know how to do their job. That's what's made the company so great. And that's the same thing that will make a training bureau or division or whatever you call it great, is great firefighters who know how to do their job. And they love to do two things: teach people how to go to fires and go to fires themselves and hone their own skills. The number two thing that I see failures, and it's kind of a subset of one of the classes or one of the subsections of people I just mentioned, is the know-it-alls. I'm a training chief, captain, lieutenant, whatever it is, so therefore by definition I know it all. And they spend their time on the drill field and they spend their time on the fireground nitpicking about fairly inconsequential details because they don't really know how to comment on the things that really matter. So I mean, you gotta retain some humility. You gotta remember that you're only one fire away from your next screw up. And I've showcased that myself at least a good handful of times. So I mean, you have to stay humble and you have to open your ears up. I can't tell you how many things that I now teach here in Columbia or I now teach in Traditions classes that came from commentary or skills that I saw people do in a class that I was the instructor. There's a lot of knowledge out there. There's a lot of firefighters out there. We're all trying to figure out the next best way to do whatever. And if we open up and listen to each other and we're humble and all at the same level, collectively we'll do a lot of good.
Dan, did you want to chime in on that, or?
Yeah, I think Nick really hit a solid point there, which is our goal should always be to develop that mastery. And some people confuse mastery as I'm at the top of the mountain, I don't have to do anything else. Versus the reality is it's always seeking the process to get to the top of that mountain. And by doing each one of those jobs, leading up to when you're the training chief, gives you that street credibility that you can do it, but also you can appreciate when you're teaching these techniques that, yeah, I know it's difficult doing forcible entry. I get what you're trying to do, and like Nick said, I mean, now you can go out there and actually do it, and you appreciate it. I know for me, just being recently promoted to chief, one of the greatest things that one of my predecessor told me was, make sure when you run a fire, that while you're sitting there giving all your orders, that you look, put your window down and understand what the temperature is outside. Because as you give all these orders in your climate-controlled car, it's easy. But if it's 100 degrees or it's 10 below zero, you're not taking the fact that you have people who are executing this. And so you have to always have an appreciation for that. And I think the other part that Nick kind of talked about is, some people have to understand is we confuse rank with leadership. And just because you ascend to the ranks doesn't mean you are a great leader. And for us to exercise that leadership is to do exactly what Erich was saying, is make sure you're doing the right thing when you are leading that charge. I mean, you can't be in charge of training and then you're the guy with your waist straps done all the time because you have all the experience, and when the big fire comes out, you'll be okay. We don't get to pick and choose. I don't think anyone, and unfortunately they can't tell us, who was suffered through a line of duty death said, oh, well, this is the day I chose to go. No, it's unfortunate circumstances all came together, and it's really unfortunate when we can track it back and say it was that confluence of basic fundamental things all coming together that could have been curtailed by us doing exactly what Nick was saying, by having that ability, to have that mastery to go out there and demonstrate all those skills when you are teaching that.
Well, I think there was a couple of really great points that came out of that discussion. Just to wrap up those two questions. First, I'd like to thank Ryan Pennington for sending in that question. Ryan's a great guy. He'll be teaching at FDIC for us. He's done a lot of work on orders and things of that nature. And really, really neat guy and a great supporter of fire engineering, fire rescue, FDIC. We always appreciate hearing from Ryan, and we'll be doing more with Ryan down the road. And Jonathan Kay is also a good friend of ours. And if you want to get a question in, it's hashtag FETalk, hashtag FETalk, and Brandon will bring those questions in as they come floating in, so he'll let us know when he's got a question. But I think a couple of really important things were said there. One is that pedigree matters. In other words, we at FDIC, we always make sure if a guy puts in for, hey, I want to do a class on the role of the chief officer at a tsunami, and the guy's a firefighter from Rattlesnake, Arizona, probably not the guy or gal to be teaching that class. You didn't have time on the streets as a chief officer, and probably very few tsunamis hitting Rattlesnake, Arizona. So we one of the things we try to do in the vetting process is find out what's the cat's pedigree, and and then what are they teaching on? Is it something that they've had experience with? Because I think Will Rogers said it best, and it's a great thing for trainers. He said some men learn by watching, some men learn by reading, but most of us just got to piss on that electric fence. And that's, you put those three things. He was ahead of his time. And, Will Rogers' common sense was his forte. And when you think about it, though, combine those three things. You let a man read about it. You let a man watch it be demonstrated. And then you put it, or a woman, and you put their hands on it. That completes that cycle. And then you put your hands on it over and over and over again, and you read more and more about it. So I think that everything everybody said there was important. And I think that one of the best comments, and he said it, and I always appreciate how Nick is kind of self-deprecating, but the measure of a good officer, or even a good person, it isn't that they're mistake-free. It's that they learn from their mistakes, and they either corrected them, or they moved on, or they got better from them. There's a lot of parking lots across New Mexico and Texas with my names on it, but there's a lot of buildings that those parking lots help save, at the next fire. And I'm not ashamed to say that. We all made our share of mistakes, as Nick pointed out, and there's nothing wrong with that. The only guy that hasn't made mistakes is the guy or gal that hasn't tried. And you don't want to be that. You don't want to be that guy or that gal. You want to be the next one. So I don't know if we have another question, but I kind of have a question. Where do you see? I mean, we've talked about a lot about the basics. We've talked a lot about core competencies, and we get that. Where do you see some of this stuff going in the future? And I mean, even beyond, we're having a lot of talk these days about flow paths. I think that's really important. But in terms of, I think, there's a lot of conversation we need to have on fire flows. I think we need to have a lot of conversation on attack profiles, and I think there's just a lot of conversation that needs to be had, because all of it has to be interpreted. And I think it was either Ricky or Nick said it earlier, because it has to be localized. Then, you know what I mean? It has to match the resources and the community, where that theory then gets, I don't want to say diluted, but it gets, I don't know what the proper word for it, filtered to that community's needs and capabilities. So as guys, Erich especially goes around the country, and I know all three of our guests today go around the country all the time and deal with organizations. What do you see? And I'll tell you the thing I'm looking at, and I think is fascinating, and I think there's going to be a lot of study and talk about in the future, are the use of these curtains. My friends in Germany are having tremendous success using these curtains and controlling. They're kind of like, they're taking the door, but then they're throwing a curtain, because the curtain's easier than opening a door and swinging a door. You can slide the line underneath it. Kind of interesting stuff. I'm fascinated by it. I mean, I don't know where it's going to go tactically for us, but I love stuff like that. I like to look at new tools and stuff like that. What are you all seeing? I mean, what's captured your imaginations? Because you're the thought leaders. You're the guys with the pedigrees, and you're out there fighting fire every day. What are you seeing? What are you thinking about? I mean, we've got the cellar nozzles are back, and high-rise nozzles are back, and there's just some cool stuff we're rediscovering, and some new stuff that's coming out. So I don't know, what are you all thinking about?
Well, I think it's, I mean, I'll offer my 2 cents on it. Two things I think are really, that are on the forefront is not so much the tactics, what you're talking about with the cellar nozzles and everything else, is the science. What does the science tell us? I mean, I think, I was preaching the choir here. We know that Dan and Steve Kerber, I mean, their only passion is to actually make us better at our jobs by providing us good information. But what I really see is some people interpret that science incorrectly, and they take it as someone who is not in our job telling us to hit fire from the outside. Whereas really all Dan and Steve have done is provided us some really good names. I mean, I have this sitting right here. This is 1954, Lloyd Layman's book. He didn't call it a flow path, but he talked about an influx of air, a fuel source, and an exhaust point. The fire's going to get bigger without intervention of water. So
another source there, Dan, besides Lloyd, if you want to see a guy who wrote about it, Google the name Braidwood, James Braidwood.
Okay.
Was actually the head of the London Fire Establishment, and he wrote about flow paths and air tracks in 1866.
It's great stuff.
What Dan and Steve have done is they're breaking it down into the science of it and what happens when we attack it. And I think that Steve will be keynoting at FDIC. I think what they're doing is so important, and I'm glad you brought it up. And the interpretation of it is even more important. And I think Steve is helping out a great deal with that. Erich and I both serve on the the panels there, interpreting it. Point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that there has been a Emmanuel Freed wrote on it, and Braidwood wrote on it. I mean, and now, and Dan will be the first one to tell you, they're not discovering new stuff. They're validating old theory, and they're telling us why and what's going on, and to the best of their knowledge. And the neat thing about it is that knowledge is going to continue to grow with the more studies we do. And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And at least we keep coming back full circle on not taking out too many windows and water. So I mean, over the course of certain generations, it's good we always come back to that. So we're back to it again,
Yep.
and we're getting better each time. So I'm definitely looking forward to what's coming. Go ahead, Dan.
And I didn't mean to interrupt your thought, Dan, but
No, and I think at the end of the day, all this science that's being given to us, and Dan was fantastic for us when we were doing the fire behavior chapter for the book, because he was the guy I went to, because all the information they're giving is exactly what you said. Is they're putting a good name on it, and they're taking stuff that was baffling to us in the field with all the big words and putting it into a layman's version we can understand. And what I'm finding is that science is doing one of two things on the fireground for us. Either it's confirming your success or it's explaining your failure. So, if the fire didn't go out, we could probably say, look, what we're seeing from these studies is exactly what happened. We took too many windows without proper application of water. Or vice versa. Hey, the fire got knocked down quickly because you quickly got water on the fire in the best means possible. So I think that's one of the things is that struggle is to take some of that really good information and implement it into our tactics and get past the point of where it came from. Just be grateful that we have it at our disposal to be able to kind of take it and go with it. And the other part I think is really important for us to get is, personally, I cannot stand when we use this word safe as a blanket we throw over the fireground, and that really drives our training principles, because the Webster Dictionary of safe is free from harm. You can't tell me there's anything that's free from harm about crawling up a 28-foot ladder through a window that's belching black smoke to go do a search. There's nothing safe about that. So I think the key for us is to actually turn that around and teach people in these early principles of training that there are merits to risk, and that we don't teach you to go to safe and just say safe on the fireground, everything's going to be okay. In reality, we have to teach you prudent risk-taking. And that comes from exactly what Nick and you guys were saying and Ricky's saying, is that when you have the experience and you have that mastery, you can start to develop teaching people, understanding what the risk is and what risks to take and why. That was one of the things we talked about was, my God, you would probably have a best-selling book if you just called it The Why and explained everything about why we do what we do in the fire service. But to me, that's kind of the big things, is taking the science and be able to get people past the point of where it came from and use that stuff into your daily operations. And then also in that training environment, stop using safe as this blanket we lay over the fireground that makes everything okay. It doesn't allow us to ignore the failures on the fireground. And when we look at it, we're not teaching people the merits of risk and teaching them how to do prudent risk-taking on the fireground.
We had a great talk about this on one of our radio shows. I guess it was maybe last time or a couple times ago. And the biggest heartache I have with some of the information that's going out there now is not the information itself. It's just, I don't know if it seems to be coming at such a rate or whatever, where people are having trouble swallowing it. Some of us are in organizations that have such resources and size that we're able to receive that information, evaluate it, decide what to do with it, and do something about it or not do something about it. But the majority of fire departments out there, there's like one guy with like 4 or 5 bugles sitting in an office watching this saying, well, crap, we only go to 2 fires a year. What do I do with this? And they don't have the resources inside the department or maybe even in the neighboring departments to like really get a feel on what to do with that at XYZ fire department. And I think what the result ends up being in that is either blind acceptance, 100% acceptance all the time because it says so, or blind rejection. We're never going to do that. It's crap. I don't believe it. Et cetera, et cetera. And I think what we find is that neither extreme is the right way to go, but it's somewhere in the middle. That we need to be. I mean, I'll give you an example, and I'm not indicting any. But let me just preface this with: I'm not indicting anything that's come out or disagreeing with anything. But there are a lot of departments out there that, right, wrong, or indifferent, have received information as, oh, let's pull up and figure out how to apply water from the inside, and we are not going inside until we do that. And I know that's not what's been said, but it's been what's been heard by a lot of people. And I don't know if the camera's back on me here or whatever, but I drew this sketch here of a row of houses, right? And if I'm at a row of houses here, let's say a block long, 7 or 8, houses long, and there's no rear access, and I have fire blowing out the second floor of one of the rear occupancies, it scares me to death that there's going to be a lot of fire departments that are pulling up right now that are going to try and figure out how to apply some of this information that they haven't fully understood, and they're trying to figure out, okay, well, the fire's in the rear, but there's no rear access. How are we going to get a line down there? Because we got to put water through the windows. Oh, but we're going to just put some water through the window on the front side where there's just some smoke coming out, and it's never going to get to the fire. And I'm sure you can see what I'm saying. So, that's kind of my biggest trouble, I guess, is that I feel like in many ways some of the information has just been thrown on the table in a bunch of scattered papers, and a lot of people really don't know what to do with it, and they don't really have the resources to figure out how to appropriately, do the right thing with it, if any of that makes sense.
And I think when talking with Stevie Pegram, that's one of the big things that we took from that is you have to take into account what your building stock is, what your staffing is, what your response times are, and how are you getting that full complement on the scene is going to dictate your tactics. I think all of us, Dan, Nick, and I all knew at one point or another that fires were burning differently. Something just wasn't matching what we had learned, 10 or 15 years ago. And I think Steve and Dan are the ones that said, here's what the problem is, or here's what the issues are. And they try to tell us how to, this is how the fires are burning. Now you need to change your tactics. But you can't throw away 30 years of knowledge. Like Larry Schultz would say, okay, as of when Steve and Dan put this paper out, now I have to forget everything I learned before and relearn it. And you just can't throw that information away. And you have to develop the tactics for your department, for your building stock, for your response area, and you have to develop training for it. Like Nick was just talking about, is that they always, every one of these scenarios that they show us, that Steve and Dan show us, which are great, by the way. Couldn't be two more intelligent gentlemen telling us how to do this. Is that it's a fire in the front room on the A-B quadrant or the AD quadrant, and they pull up to the house and they put it out from that window. What if it's a 2 in the front, 3 in the rear house, and fire's in the rear bedroom? You're going to stretch your 200-foot pre-connect all the way around, knock it down. By the time you re-stretch that line back around front, the fire's taken back up again. So you have to develop these tactics and training for your area and for your building stock, using Dan's information, but using it intelligently. Like Nick said, you just can't go, hey, we're always going to do this every time, because that's what this slicers thing says. So I get on a pet peeve about that a lot, and God, it's a good thing Larry Schultz isn't on here, because he'd be grabbing the screen, shaking it. So because he believes that you got to take all that in and digest it, and then make it work for your area. You just can't take Steve and Dan's information and apply it to every house, every garden apartment building, every 3-story row like in DC, and expect it to work all the time and have our same results, which is the protection of protection of lives and the protection of property. Sorry.
No, I think you're spot on. Tommy Brennan always taught us it's about being thinking firefighters, and I don't care whether it's tactics or tools or technique. Pardon me. You have to know when to apply that tactic, tool, or technique, when not to, when to opt. There's no silver bullets, and and Eddie Buchanan, who's a great friend, came up with a great slicers acronym.
Oh yeah.
Eddie's a great instructor. And what he wants people to do with that is use it as a training tool, so that people, when you're running through scenarios and you're doing your simulations, it's another tool, like Colwa's Wealth, or, there's a million different acronyms out there that help you to, Lunar and all those acronyms we use, help you to think. But the way to really get there is through drill, experience, and thinking, and evaluated experience. You can, we all know, I got a great buddy, he's had a lot of experience getting married. Every 2 or 3 years he finds a woman he can't stand, he buys her a house. he's not learning from that experience. So you want to take a look at what happened and say, okay, these are the lessons learned. It happened this way. But what's fascinating about that, and I'll go back to what Patty Brown said, you can do everything right and still get killed in this job, because we're dealing with what's called dynamic complexity, and the socio-technical interface between what's going on behaviorally in the physics of a fire, with the fuel loading, with the air handling systems, and then human behavior are infinitesimal. There's an infinite amount of variables, and it can be one variable so minute and so that changes the entire behavior of an event. There's nobody more familiar with that than Dan Majikowski, Steve Kerber. And by the way, Majikowski, because it's such a tough name to say and spell, has decided to change his last name to Albuquerque because he thinks that'd be easier. So
it would be much easier.
Just to make a little fun of Dan. When we love
two
Dan.
Q's though.
And Dan is going to be teaching. Another shameless plug for FDIC. This year at FDIC, there's going to be, during the hands-on training, there's going to be an opportunity for people to attend a NIST UL live fire experiment. They're going to do 4 experiments, 2 each day, and you can be a part of that. You can register. There's limited slots available. So if you're going to FDIC, that's one of the hands-on training classes available. You can actually participate with Dan and Steve and George Cirillo and Healy and Stefan Svensson and you name Eddie Harton. All the players are going to be there from the panel. They're all going to be instructing, and you're going to have these folks, Derek O'Connor. I mean, some of the best names in the fire service, some of the best thinkers I think in the fire service are going to be participating in that class. You're going to do the experiments in the morning, go back to the convention center, evaluate the data, and talk about it from a technical, tactical, task, technique perspective, analyzing that data and what happened, and see if what the presumption of the presumptive outcome of the experiment in the morning matched the outcome in the data that it produced. So shameless plug for FDIC, but great class also. Dan and Ricky and Nick will all be teaching at FDIC, so please come and take their classes, and I can't thank you guys enough. I'll tell you, one of the things, and we kind of have to start wrapping up, but I just want to say something about these guys, and this is from the bottom of my heart. We talk a lot, I talk a lot in the fire service about virtue and character, and I do it because I think it matters. I think that in the fire service we should live by the honor code. I think every fire service should have a plaque in it that says, "We will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do." That's the honor code from the U.S. Army's school at West Point, and it served the Army well. We will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate others who do. And I'll tell you a little story about these friends of mine that are on with us today. It had to be, what, 9 or 10 years ago, guys? We bumped into each other, probably 10 years ago. And,
it was down at Fairfax Fire Officer Seminar.
Yeah, and they said, hey, we'd like to have a talk together. I said, sure, I'd love to meet you. So we met in a restaurant, and we shook hands, and all of the work that Traditions Training has done for fire engineering and fire rescue and Firefighter Nation and fireengineering.com and FDIC has been based on a handshake. And these guys have had dozens of better offers, and all kinds of people have come to them about, come with us and we'll make you kings. And I know for a fact that they've never even considered it, because if you want people who are honest, you want people who have integrity, and you want people who are dedicated and passionate and honorable, these are the guys. These are guys who I couldn't offer them some of the stuff that other people have offered them, but out of integrity, because that matters. There's only one thing you're going to leave at the end of the day when you check out finally and go meet your maker, and that's your legacy is basically going to be your character and your good name, and everything else goes away. Everything else goes away, except your character and your good name, and that's what you're remembered by. And I'll tell you what, everyone I know at Traditions Training, if they come to your town and you're thinking about working with them, you're bringing in guys with character and guys who their handshake is their word. You don't need to sign a 30-page contract with these guys. If they say they're going to show up, they're going to show up. If they say they're going to do the right thing, they're going to do the right thing. And I thank you guys for your friendship and your and your kindness to me over the years, because you've helped make Fire Engineering a better magazine. You've helped Fire Rescue. You've helped FDIC. Whenever I've had a favor to ask, you've always stepped up to the plate and done 200% more than I ever dreamt you could possibly do. And I'll always be in your debt. And I think people out there who are listening to this should know not just how much you know, but how much you care, and more importantly, who you are. You're the epitome of what good firefighters are.
We appreciate that. Erich told me a couple years ago never to cross the Godfather, and then he pointed to you. So we've lived by that code.
Yeah, I don't want a dead horse in my bed or a fish getting delivered to me.
Hey, bring the cannolis, leave the gun.
Yeah. As long as you don't get a dead fish delivered to you, right?
And it's well known I own a lot of guns. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a First Amendment right. I think everybody should own a lot of guns.
We just took a lot of advice from Erich when that's the only person we could talk to because there's such a crowd around you. So we talked to Erich and we started getting all the information. So.
He's the future. I'm just old and in the way. So
I doubt that.
I'm
I
just
know he's the future, though.
Hey, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the folks with before we sign off? We're at the end of our hour here, and I know folks have to get back to their duties. I know a lot of folks take their Wednesday hour out to attend these hangouts. We sure do appreciate you. Got a couple of good hangouts coming up in the future, guys. If you'd let your friends know, we've got Angela Hughes is going to be doing a thing on sexual assault for us. Is there something I should be reading here? Why don't you just talk about it? Angela Hughes is going to be coming on and talking with Beth Murphy and John Murphy about sexual assault in the fire service. That's a heavy-duty topic, and it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be stopped now. And maybe part of the honor code should be, I won't lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate bullies, because it's the most heinous form of bullying, intimidation. Also, we got a great hangout coming up in October with Bill Guston.
Oh boy.
Operations. He's got an all-star cast. So,
I just got done taking a class from him last week. Oh my God.
Did you?
We refer to those as events.
Yeah, they're not classes. Those are events. Those are life-changing events. We have a 12-step program for people who've attended Bill's classes.
I think his new statement at the class last week was, ask the student if he was offended by what he had said, and the student said yes, and he said, well, maybe you should learn something to teach your own class, because I'm here to offend you. Okay. My man Bill Guston.
I'm going to be live on the air with this guy for an hour, so you just made me... I'm just kidding. Bill is one.
You get a bunch of these things. The glass is getting taken apart and put back on. And
he's one of the best firemen that's ever walked the face of this planet, hands down.
I'm getting ready to turn 50, and he was an officer when I graduated high school in Miami-Dade. So that guy's been riding the front seat of a fire truck for a long, long time.
Well, just because you're still junior, you don't have to rub it in everybody's faces.
Oh, he's the man.
Any other closing thoughts? Anything you want to say before we sign off? And the mic's all yours, guys.
Hey, just real quick, there's nothing that's more of a privilege than just having the opportunity to be around all of you, and by all of you, I mean the entire fire engineering family and the awesome people that you manage to continue to attract. I mean, it's how that filters down through everything to everybody that we all have in contact with. I mean, I just know that these opportunities are what keep me energetic and keep me re-engaged and everything. So thank you. And then just to kind of summarize on today or whatever, the topic we talked about in email was how does this training impact the fireground? And I mean, as soon as I saw that, I mean, my eyes lit up, because so many times in the past, I remember the days, and as I'm sure you do, where the word training came out and everybody's eyes went down, because it sucked, to make that short. But nowadays, training in the past 10 years has gotten a new life. I think a lot of people are doing training in a way now that is exciting, that is engaging, that is relevant, and I think we are seeing that pay out on the fireground, because it's I say it every chance I get with my recruits and the guys down at the training academy. We control so many elements in the training environment there is no chance you will do any better on the uncontrolled fire environment than you do here on the training ground. So if we can't achieve 100% here in these controlled circumstances, what expectation are we setting ourselves up for in the real world? So, I don't think you're listening to this if you don't know how much training and good training actually impacts what happens on the fire ground. But let's all always remember too that's what matters. What happens on the fire ground is what everything else is all about, and is why we're here.
And I would just echo Nick's comments, because the debt of gratitude is owed to the fire engineering group for really reaching out to us, because we're just normal guys. We're like every person listening to this. We're just normal firefighters who have a passion for this job, and you provided us the platform and the opportunity and the privilege to go out there and share information our mentors taught us. And if I would leave with anything, is one of the things we really stress in our classes is if you want to be a good training officer, you want to do good training, that really means you have to be a student of this profession. And the Marine Corps had a great analogy they used. They called it the 5,000-year mind. It was based upon the fact that the Marine Corps has 5,000 years of documented warfare on the books. So every day an officer should be in the books reading about the successes and failures so they can turn around and implement that into their day. And so we have 2,000 years of documented firefighting on the books. Every day we should be a student, regardless of your rank, where you are, your years of tenure. Bill Gustin's a perfect example. I'm sure he's in the books every single day. And we need to be in the books, learning from our failures, learning from our successes, and then turning that around and sharing it for the next generation, because you're trying to create the legacy. And it doesn't die with all of us. The fire department doesn't stop when one of us leaves. So, continue to be a student and continue to be combat ready every single day.
I just want to thank Erich and Bobby. I mean, obviously, we're loyal to you. We appreciate the opportunities you've given us. And as our founder, Pete Lum, would say, stay combat ready. And if you're at FDIC this year, Tony Kelleher's teaching that class. He's taught it for the last 2 years. Nick started it about 3 years ago. If you want to get energized, you want to find out about how you need to prepare yourself every day for a fire, that is the class to go to. You'll come away pumped up from that, and it's all thanks to these two gentlemen that are hosting it that we're able to present it on a national platform like that. So thank you to Erich and Bobby.
Yeah, I tell you what, I appreciate you guys joining us today. Dan, Nick, and Ricky doing great things with Traditions Training. Go to their website, check out their class offerings. Lots of exciting things coming up, a lot of good hangouts coming up. Next week we'll be talking with Chris Naum, Chris Willis, and Bill Carey, Fire Rescue Zone, about some pretty interesting things. So we hope you guys join us next week, Wednesday as well. So
hey, you got a good man in that Bill Carey.
Today we look forward to getting more of your questions in next week and weeks after. So from San Diego, from behalf of Bobby and Erich and Fire Engineering, Fire Apparatus, and Fire Rescue, thank you all very much for watching.
Keep Hartford in your thoughts and prayers, guys, and also Cal Fire. God bless those guys, and God bless their families, and everybody else. Be careful out there. Love you. Bye.